For live. Hello. We're live. We're live. We are. We can see people joining. Like Armand just joined. Snowy Owl joined. Alexandra. This is great. We've got people piling in. Hello, Lori.
Hi, how are you?
Good. This is so fun. It's a reunion of sorts because we probably haven't seen each other in 20 years, like
Well,
actual face to face, right?
I was trying to think, how do we know each other? Do we go back to like YM?
We do. So let's a quick. We actually go back to YM. I never worked for YM, but I was a writer for YM, but I never worked
Yes, and
on
I
staff.
assigned you some articles, right?
You did, and I worked. First, I worked in the same building. So first, I worked at Child Magazine, and then I worked at Fitness, and and we were all in the same building together. So I kind of hung out with a lot of the YM folk. So I knew like Michelle Promolyko and all these people that were
Just
like
had dinner with her last week.
really. So she's
Yes.
awesome. And I've sort of since it's been the good thing about having a podcast is I'm able to reconnect with people like you guys. And then I went and visited Michelle Promolyko when she was at Cosmo. And then I went, you and I talked when your book came out. So we've had a chance to like connect all these years later. But this is
I
super
feel
fun.
like that the 90s magazine world, it was, people don't even understand. I was just listening to the audio book of Fleischman's in Trouble, and one of the characters is she writes for a men's magazine, and she's like, back when men's magazine writers could actually buy a home. Like,
Oh my good. She might have been referring to me because I actually am friendly with the author of that book, Taffy. Because did you know Taffy? Yeah.
I know her through my friend Shirley Halperin, who just
Yes.
became the first female editor of Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
what's amazing is that she was like us. She was at Media Bistro.
Yep. She wasn't even a teacher at Media Bistro. She was a administrator. She was the head of Media Bistro LA. That's how I met her because she hired me to teach classes. And then we didn't know that she had actually worked at Soap Opera Digest. I would have found out later, but
Oh, right.
yeah, with Gruner and Yara when I was, not Gruner and Yara, the other one, Bauer. But anyway, when I was at Twist, she was there. But anyway, the funny thing about Taffy is that, and I've told this before, like she was just an administrator. Nobody knew that she was this incredible talent, like she was hiring writers to teach classes. And it turns out she's like this unbelievable talent. So anyway, it just shows, and she started her career late, and now she's had incredible success. We're talking about Taffy Brodesser-Akner, the author of Fleischman is in Trouble. She also somehow
The Long
ended up,
Island Compromise,
yeah,
which
the
I
Long Island.
read first.
Oh, okay.
And I was just having talk with my friend Jonathan Bernstein
Yeah.
from Spin Magazine, and we were arguing because he likes Fleischman's in Trouble better,
More.
and I said Long Island Compromise. It's whoa, but I'm not
It's
done with Fleischman, so I can't really
okay.
make that
She's a
judgment.
great writer, and I will not deny that I'm completely envious of her career, but she deserves every accolade that she's gotten because she's never. Anyway, so she's started magazine writing late, became an author, then became a showrunner. It just shows you that anything is possible. Like she just followed her dreams, and she's talented and good for Taffy. But we're here to talk about Lori Majewski today. Lori
I'm no
and the
Taffy.
80s. Yes, you're Taffy. You're your own Taffy. But Lori, you've got such a great story. Like you said, I've known you for years. I didn't know until I had you on my podcast right about now and interviewed you about your book, which we can talk about. I didn't really know your backstory. I knew that you were a tremendous Duran Duran fan, but I didn't know like how you got into that whole like. So
If anyone is listening, that's one of my friends or acquaintances or
they've heard this a
listeners, they're
thousand
like,
times. Boring. So we have
I've
okay.
heard
So
that.
we'll do the short version. And then we're gonna get into because we're gonna get into what you're doing now because it's really interesting how you've transitioned in your career and kind of you start off in magazines and were very successful in magazines, but like all of us magazines veterans, you had to kind of pivot and find other ways to use your talents in ways that are now applicable in 2025. And I've been
That's
really
what
your
Gen
career.
Xers have to
That's what
do,
we do. We
especially those
pivot.
in media.
Yes, we pivot. And, there's not too many Shirley Halperins out there who actually still find jobs in magazines, which is big ups to Shirley. I know Shirley as well. So, there's not a whole lot of magazine jobs and they don't pay as well as they used to, unfortunately. So anyway, real short version, You grew up a tremendous Duran Duran fan. Talk about how you ended up getting to know the band. Like you were just, this is not, Lori does not come from a background of privilege. You were like a working class family, right?
Major blue collar
Yeah.
family where my dad worked the same job as a plumber at a New York hotel for more than 40 years. My mom
Goodness.
worked as a teacher's aide. She helped to usher in pre-kindergarten in New Jersey. But she didn't work until my youngest brother was off to high school. So yeah, super blue collar, Weehawken, New Jersey. And I one privilege I had,
Yeah.
uh, besides being white, was I had MTV before almost anybody in my school, and before most people in America, because Weehawken, New Jersey was a
Oh,
test ground for MTV. They put it on our cable service, and the way it worked, each one of our streets in where I lived in Weehawken, one week got cabled, then the next week, the next street got cable, and the next. So I was on the first street that got cable and the first street that got MTV.
that's wild.
Yeah. And I have to really credit MTV and Duran Duran with so much of what came afterward in my life. Because I feel like it gave me a look. Before that, I was Olivia Newton-John, Grease.
Right.
My dad listened to the
AM radio, NBC, WNBC, WABC, right? That's what,
Well,
because we
he
grew up in New
actually
York.
listened to a country radio station on AM, and it was when New York had a country radio station. I mean, they may again now, but for decades did not. So I grew up loving Olivia Newton-John. I loved Kenny Rogers, the Grease soundtrack. Air
Yeah.
Supply was my first favorite band. I loved, and I will still go see any Air Supply
Air supply.
concert that I can. But
They need air supply, I'm sure, at this point. Oh,
yeah,
that's mean. That was mean.
love Air Supply. But the problem is that at the late 70s, early 80s, in other parts of the world, like on the Bowery, things were alternative and things were cool, but I didn't know about it.
CBGBs, right. We didn't know about
Exactly. I was,
Blondie and Talking Heads and the
yeah, I was
Ramones,
too
right?
young.
Yeah.
I was too young. But when MTV happened, it brought an alternative point of view and alternative music to my television. And the first video I ever saw was Talking Heads Once in a Lifetime, and I thought, "What the hell is this?" And I
Best
loved
video.
Rick Springfield, but I went
Hmm.
from Rick Springfield and Air Supply and Top 40, just loving that, to realizing that there's something else out there. And for me, Duran Duran represented an escape. I often say that they were just like me. They were growing up, you know, middle class kids. I was definitely lower middle, but they were middle class kids in Birmingham, England. And next thing you know, they're filming a video on the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I
Right.
don't think I even thought I'd ever go to Europe in my lifetime. My parents didn't have a car. My parents didn't have a passport.
Wow.
I just never thought of life outside, although every night I would go to bed with the Empire State Building shining right in front of me, because where I live in Weehawken is right across from the Empire State Building. And, you know, I always felt like there was life there. Where's my
Hmm.
life? And I
Hmm.
felt that MTV and Duran Duran showing me that, and David Bowie showing me that there's life on Mars. There's life outside of
Totally.
this small minded town.
Yeah, what an amazing, it's funny that I just got to give a shout out right now that one of the people joining is a guy named Marco Ranieri. And Marco is the first person he's a middle school friend. We went to high school together and we even went to the same college and we're still friendly. And he is the first person that I ever saw MTV with. I don't even think he knows this. I remember seeing, I think it was In the Air Tonight, Phil Collins at his house in Ossining, New York. So I think maybe Ossining was another testing ground for MTV because I had never seen MTV before. But
It
yeah,
was the suburbs.
yeah, it was the suburbs, right? They were scared to bring it out, or maybe they couldn't afford to put it out in the city. So Duran Duran caught your fancy to the point where you kind of stalked them in a nice way, in a journalistic way, right?
Well, so
To
First,
skip
I
ahead.
love them, and I never think I could ever meet them,
Right.
but I found myself waiting for tickets for Duran Duran, and in this line, I decided I had to have as close to the front as possible, and so I didn't sleep out for tickets one night, I slept out 2 nights, and I
Oh my
told my
God.
parents that I was at some girlfriend's house, Gen X, that's what we did.
Yeah, we did. We could get away
Before,
with it.
like, an
They
app
didn't
that
have
could
the thing.
show
Yeah,
you
they could
where
track
you
you.
are,
Exactly.
right?
Exact.
So I and there was a boy that was like my ducky, shout out to Pretty in Pink, that, like, accompanied me and stayed overnight, and I met these people. I was, like, 7th in line, and I remember that because I was like, "I'm not first? How could I not be
Right.
first in line? I'm sleeping over 2 nights."
Right. Other people know this band. I know.
I know, but I was 7th in line, and there were a bunch of people there who knew where the band stayed, and so they the they told me, like, we became really friends over those 48 hours, and they told me, and I went to that hotel, and from there, after meeting and talking to them. I didn't meet John Taylor yet, who's my favorite. And those girls followed the band in a cab to wherever they were recording. And then now we knew not only the hotel, but the recording studio. And, you know, if you stay there often enough, you get to know them.
Right.
And, the
And
next
they weren't like,
summer,
who is this? I mean, how old were you at that time? You were 16, 17?
16.
Yeah. And they were
I was
just like, oh, here's
16.
one of our fans. Like,
Well, when you went to the hotel, there were probably 50 people, and then
right.
when you went to the studio, there were probably about 15 people, and
And was
then
the
the
Hotel
follow
Irving Plaza? It,
what?
was the hotel the Irving Plaza?
No, the hotel was the Parker Meridian on 56.
Oh, okay. Because so many.
245 9000. I still remember the phone number.
Oh my God. That's another thing. Gen Xers always remember phone numbers. Yeah,
I just talked about this a
I
few
know.
hours ago, Jonathan. I
We were
was
memorized.
just talking about this.
Right.
I
We
can't
memorized. I could
remember
tell you. I know where I put my keys, but I can remember my best friend's phone number from in 1984. Yeah, exactly.
the best
Um,
year ever.
great year for music. All right. So I cut you. You would basically, and you would get interviews with them, right? This was the beginning of your journalism career.
Well, around that time, they closed their official fan club.
Hmm.
So I decided I was going to keep things going because how was the band going to who was going to call the radio stations? Like we needed to mobilize. We were a fan army before there was the internet. So we had to mobilize, and I started a fanzine called Too Much Information, the definitive Dranzine, but Too Much Information, TMI for short. It's funny, on Sirius XM now, I have a 4 times daily news moment where I
Hmm.
give the news of the day, and it's called TMI. And the
I
funny
love
thing
that.
is, I didn't even suggest it.
Oh,
They
really?
were like, "What if you call it TMI?" I'm like, "Oh my God, that's my old fanzine."
That's
So basically, with this fanzine, I did everything from ask them for interviews, which they allowed me to have. I'd take pictures of them. Me and my staff staff of 5 friends took pictures of them. I had a girl in London, I had a girl in LA. So wherever they went, we had it covered. I also did little interviews with Trent Reznor, asking him his favorite Duran Duran song. Or during Fashion Week, I waited outside of a fashion show and I asked all the supermodels for their favorite Duran Duran songs. So
right.
when I end up going for a job interview at YM, Young and Modern, Young
It
Miss
was Young
previous,
Miss. It was Young Miss back
but
then.
we turned it into Young and Modern.
Yes, when you were running it, right?
Yeah. Well, I
Or
wasn't
yeah, well,
running it,
Sally when
but
Sally was
I
running
was
it. Yeah,
on the yes, it became Young and Modern.
yeah.
Um, Once I went for that job interview, I remember Linda Friedman saying to me, "Listen, if you can run your entire own magazine," and we had a circulation of 5,000 worldwide.
Amazing.
She said, "Of course, I can't imagine you can't do a few pages in the magazine every month, be responsible for." And that's one of those pages, I think it was called Real Life or something, that I hired you to write something for me for.
Yes, I was sort of I spent the early part of my career as sort of the guy guru of it was like explaining men to women, to young
Was it
women.
called Guys Explained or
It
something
was
like that?
guys explained. Yeah. Later, it would when I went to Cosmo, then I was the guy guru, and then I went to Jake. I was when I went to Glamour, I was Jake. So I had this little niche that I carved out for myself, which is I want to write about someday because it was really fascinating. It was the best job I
Well, they
ever had.
assumed you
The only ad
understood
advice
women.
they assumed, and I actually did. I was very good at explaining men to women, not so good at figuring out how to explain myself to myself, but I was a good, and I think my karma is now I've ended up with a therapist, wife who is like everything you said was wrong. But you know, it's no, she actually would always help me a lot with the column. She was great. But yeah, so that's kind of how we met, and that's how I kind of made these inroads into all these women's magazines. Is I was kind of always positioned as that male expert, and you were great, and you gave me a ton of assignments. You would go on to I'm going to skip ahead here, but you would go on to become, you would run the Duran Duran fan club. Do you still run their fan club?
It's not official.
Okay.
I started my own fanzine
Right.
because they closed their official fan club. And no, I do not. I think by the time maybe it was like at the end of my YM days when I was going to start Teen People, I just couldn't do both jobs anymore. So, and I had accomplished what I set out to do. You know, my big job thing when I was 11 was I wanted to meet Duran Duran, and that's sort of why I chose this vocation. And then I got to meet them and interview them in college. And then the tables turned a little bit because I became a champion of theirs. And to this
Right.
day, John Taylor from Duran is a champion of mine. And he helps
Ha-
me get through so much. But like
Talk.
back,
Wait, can you talk? How much can you tell us about? Like, does he give you advice? You call him up? Like, what kind of
well,
relationship do you have
okay,
with?
this is hilarious. When we still had answering machines,
Uh
I
huh.
was up for a job at Cosmopolitan and I doubted myself. I didn't know yet about what imposter syndrome was, but I
Hmm.
convinced myself that I was lucky to have made it where I had at YM and to have interviewed Duran Duran, and I shouldn't ask for anything more. And now I'm up for this big job at Cosmopolitan. How can I do this? And I wrote him a letter, and I don't know why him. Maybe he
Right.
was my guy guru, but like we didn't really have that kind of a relationship yet. Like,
Hmm.
I, I don't know why, but this is how nice he is. I wrote him a letter and I said, you know, I've watched you super successful, but I know where you came from. And I wonder if you ever get this feeling. And I was describing imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
but I didn't
Before
know
that was a thing.
what it
Yeah.
was,
That was
right?
like an yeah.
And I came home one day to find on my answering machine, the one with the little tape and shit, like, "Hi, this is John. I got your letter, and I really wanna talk to you about it." I was like, "What?
What?
What?
You must have been like,
What?" I
this
was
is
like,
before a mind blown emoji, but there
I
would have
mean,
been like the smoke. Yeah.
and he didn't even say John Taylor. He went, "This is John." I was just like, "Oh my god." So I called them back and, you know, we talked for a while. And I think that is a place that the two of us meet. That, you know, he named one of his solo albums Autodidact. And it, to me, is describes not only him, but me, is that, you know, my parents were the first in their family to graduate high school. They didn't go to college. Again, they didn't have driver's licenses. Like, everything was on me if I was going to succeed. There were no contacts that they had in media, no friends, nothing. It was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this. And it was similar in a lot of ways for him. And he had to learn the music industry, and things happened so quickly for him, you know, but he always felt like,
An outsider.
yeah, you know, because like the way he describes it, like midway through, like maybe 5 years into their career, he realizes I never had an official lesson to learn the bass.
Hmm.
You know, I never like, how did I get here? And was it luck? And how do I keep going? So that album, Autodidact, which was a solo record, and imagine how he felt after he left the band and didn't have that name behind him anymore. It's like, who am
Yeah.
I? You know,
Right.
and I feel an autodidact a didact is someone that teaches themselves, right?
Hmm.
So we that is something that to this day, when I tell you he inspired me, yes, he's gorgeous and he's talented bass player, and I've loved him for most of my life, but I'm most impressed by him by we talk about what book are you reading? You know, what I, he's the kind of guy that in his spare time is probably learning Chinese. Like he is always pushing forward,
So not
always
only is he
better.
incredibly handsome and talented, but he's also a good person. Damn it. He's
The
got it
great.
all. It's
Yeah,
and
he's a great person.
it's nice that because oftentimes we'll meet our idols and they don't really live up to what we've made them out to be, unfortunately. I hear that story a lot where people will like finally meet their idols and they're like, oh no, they were kind of a jerk or they were rude to me or whatever. So, but it's nice to know that you met your idol and he was actually even more than you imagined in your teenage years of him being like, what do you think it is about Duran Duran that I mean, they're one of the bands that has really endured like for, past the 80s. Like there's a lot of bands from the 80s that I love their music, but I don't know if they could fill Hollywood Bowl. Um, I saw Duran Duran a few years ago at the Hollywood Bowl. They always fill it out. They could probably sell out 3 nights in a row if they wanted to. They just can,
They
there's a
have.
few bands like that. Depeche Mode. There's a few bands, but there's a lot of, as you know, there's also a lot of bands that will now go on these circuits where they're not quite big enough to sell out, so they'll team up with a lot of other 80s bands and then they'll kind of do
Yes.
shows. So but Duran Duran doesn't need to do that. So what is it about Duran Duran? I mean, aside from that, they do have great songs. I mean, they have so many great songs. But what do you think it is about them that really is like helped them have staying power?
I think positivity is
Yeah.
really important. You know, they've endured so much backlash. The idea that young women like them, right? Like they've endured so much backlash over the years, but then there was backlash to the backlash. And now they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm
Yeah.
very proud of that. I really pushed for that. I was at when the Foo Fighters got inducted, I went to their little congratulatory after party and I was talking to Taylor Hawkins, RIP.
Hmm.
And Taylor used his speech to shout out bands that should be or artists that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Did not say Duran Duran, but he said George Michael. And I remember
Hmm.
saying to him, like, yes. And I said, I think Duran Duran should be in. He's like, they're not in. Like he was like shocked. And
Yeah.
I think what happened is there was backlash, then there was backlash to the backlash. And now there are people, you know, Dave Grohl was in the audience when Duran got inducted, singing every word to Ordinary World by Duran Duran. So I
Hmm.
think
I love
people
that song.
who grew up with them and that those people meant something to them. I think those artists, but Duran specifically, I think it's positivity. It's never throwing in the towel. So many bands said, I'm not in vogue anymore. I'm not, what are we going to do? Or do we change our sound? They just did what they wanted to do and they kept going. And I
Yeah.
think Madonna said surviving is her greatest trick, right? Like surviving is her greatest achievement.
Yeah, and
So
it's a good, and they're not Gen X Duran Duran. They're probably a little bit older than we are, right? They're probably more on the boomer set, but
they're boomers.
they have those traits that we admire, which is they're able to pivot and survive and adapt. They're really adaptable and still stay relevant today.
And
What
write
it
songs.
and just write. They write real songs. You mentioned George Michael being a great songwriter. Last week I had on a guy by the name of Sam Hollander, who's a songwriter. Do you know
Did
Sam
you?
Hollander? Yeah.
Yes.
And he's a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of, I met him through Adam, actually, Adam Schlesinger. But anyway, Sam was talking about how he thinks that George Michael is one of the most underrated songwriters, that he hasn't really, his legacy, like the kids don't know as much about George Michael as like we do. Like, and that was just his observation. He's like, but from a songwriting perspective, like George Michael was a genius. Like his songs are
Well, and you know
perfect.
what's different about George Michael than a lot of songwriters? A perfect catalog, no
Yeah.
filler. He was
Yeah.
not prolific. He
Right.
did not write tons of songs and tons of albums. What he did do, though, was perfect.
Yeah.
And
He said he said he was a
I think
perfect
more
songwriter, a
about
classic. Yeah, a classic songwriter. Yeah.
did you talk to Sam before the Taylor Swift album drop info?
No, tell me about what happened. Inform me.
Well, one of the songs on Taylor Swift's new forthcoming record, um, Life of a Showgirl, is an interpolation of father figure. So I think
Oh,
suddenly George Michael is going to be back
good. If there's
in a
anybody
big
that can put him back
way,
on the map, is Taylor. Yeah.
right? And in front of an audience of a new generation.
Yeah.
So I really hope that because I think George is just
He's amazing.
so underrated.
Did you get a chance to meet him? Well,
I have met him, but I met him as a fan waiting outside a hotel. I never met him as a professional. I never got to interview him.
yeah.
And I was so stunned when I met him that I couldn't even really
Yeah.
much.
He was so handsome that he was just like beyond the beyond.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but also he just radiated. Like there are
Yeah.
certain people that radiate, and he's one of them. For
Yeah.
sure.
Well, R.I.P. George Michael. I love his music too. Favorite Duran Duran song? I know we talked about this in my interview with you a few years ago, and I think we agreed on a song, which is I was so impressed that my favorite Duran Duran song was actually yours, and you
All
know
right,
their
let's
catalog.
see.
It's kind of like picking a favorite child. I understand that. Like you have songs probably that go in and out. But
Yeah.
there is a song that I just think is their best song. It's not the one that is played a lot on the radio, but I wonder if you and I will agree. Well, if you had to think about it, it's
So I go back and forth between two songs that are on the same album. Different vibes, but both utterly Duran Duran. And I'd say it's The Chauffeur
that's
and
mine. That was mine.
and
That's
New
mine.
Religion.
Oh wow. Okay. I have to
But The
listen to New Religion.
Chauffeur, come on. The
The
Chauffeur to me is
chauffeur.
Duran Duran in a nutshell. Like if
It's
you could
everything.
only play one song and say, what Duran Duran is, it's sexy, it's really esoteric and original and dark. That to me is special. That's what's
People are.
special.
I'm seeing people are saying "Save a Prayer." I mean, by the way, I
Same
pretty
album.
much. Yeah. I mean, I love Save a Prayer and I love A View to a Kill. I mean, the story of A View to a Kill is kind of interesting, right? Like they had to write that very quickly. I don't know, you probably know the story of that better, but like they wrote that. My understanding is they had to write that like almost like they found out that they got this could be wrong, but they found out they got this James Bond gig and they had to do it really quickly. And like that song is like a perfect song. And the fact that they did that quickly is incredibly
And that
impressive.
it sounds like Duran Duran meets James Bond.
Yeah. It like has the vibe. Yeah. And they were
Oh,
in,
God.
anyway.
That's
And I
my
love,
favorite Duran Duran single. I just want to put that out there.
oh,
I
interesting.
feel like it's perfect. I feel like the way it starts, the way it ends, like it's not too long, it's dramatic, it's James Bond, the way it soars. I feel like that's my favorite single because I think it's perfect, but my favorite song by them, it goes back and forth between The Chauffeur and New Religion.
I can
Super
listen to the
sexy.
show for like again and again and never get tired of that song. There's just something about the vibe of it. Anyway, let's move on. So I want to talk. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. You had mentioned, we were talking about what should we talk about, and at the time that I had contacted you, Ozzy Osbourne had just died, and I do want to talk about Ozzy because we haven't talked about him on this
Yes.
show yet, and I think I think that really hit Gen Xers hard when he died. There was just something they really connect with him. I had the opportunity to meet him on a story I was doing, I think, for maybe it was Stuff Magazine. I went to his house in Beverly Hills and met his family. It was during when they were filming The Osbournes a long time ago. And he was lovely, as you can imagine, very like much more genteel and kind of British than I thought he was going to be, and but also a total character. But why do you think Ozzy? I mean, I don't know if that's. I didn't. I will confess here, I didn't listen to a lot of Ozzy's music growing up, but I did feel a little pang because I just know how much people loved Ozzy. But what do you think it is about Ozzy that kind of made people kind of like get really upset when he passed?
So I mentioned before about Duran Duran for me and
Hmm.
it being the nexus of sound and vision, this MTV thing, this music, this alternative to the pop, the Britishness, the escape. I feel like there are artists that represent this, right? So David Bowie is probably the father of all alternative, and yes, there's also Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, but like in terms of like, Velvet Underground, people liked in retrospect. No, at
Yeah.
the moment, Bowie uh, gives birth to the outsider. The fan,
Hmm.
allows us to be the outsider, you know, to live that life and to embrace being different than the norm.
Mm.
And under that umbrella, so there's like a Duran Duran and there's an Ozzy Osbourne, there's like
Right.
Kiss. Kiss is really important. I keep saying the Go-Go's. So like there are these artists under that umbrella that embody for a young person in their formative years what it's like to look inside and say, I'm not like everybody else. Like, I'm
Mm.
not just top 40 riding to soccer camp or soccer practice, listening to what everyone else is listening to. And as much as I love like some of these other artists, like Ozzy lived that shit. Ozzy
Yeah.
was, Ozzy wasn't, he was like, ugh. Okay, I went to see John Proctor as the villain in The City recently.
Hmm.
Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, this
It's incredible.
play, they
I got to see
fucking
it.
need to play. This play needs to be studied in school.
They need to bring it, make it national. I didn't
It's
even know about it.
incredible.
It's incredible.
Okay.
Okay.
It's incredible. But the one thing I'll tell you about it is there's this scene where all the girls scream at once.
Mm.
And it's just this scream moment is indicative to me of teenage rage and misunderstanding and confusion and fear. And what is it like to be this person coming into this? Ozzy Osbourne is the scream as a human being. That's what I think. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like he, to young boys, he allowed them to tap into this dark side of them. The
Yeah.
Beatles, and Ozzy was the biggest Beatles fan, but
Mm.
the Beatles, by the time Ozzy comes around, is like safe. They
Yeah. They're
weren't safe in the
sanitized.
beginning.
Yeah.
They're sanitized. But Ozzy allows boys to be their darker selves. And I
Yeah.
think all these decades later, men who came of age with that figure are mourning not only Ozzy, but they're mourning their young self. They're mourning who they were, and they're
Yeah.
celebrating that they got to be that
Yeah.
metal person, that everything wasn't just like blah music, that Ozzy made them who they are. And I felt it in the moment within 2 or 3 days, because, celebrity deaths are weird, Jonathan, right? Like,
No, it's a three. It's the three. It's crazy. Right.
but, but there's a moment where my friend, he's an autograph collector and seller, and he says, "You never know who's gonna have the life after death.
Yeah.
Who's gonna
I
be
know what you mean.
remembered." He, during his lifetime, collected a bazillion Pavarottis, and he's like, "When that guy dies, he is so important that I'm gonna be selling Pavarotti for the next 100 years." Right?
Mm.
No, he can't get rid of Pavarotti, and we're like, "What,
Interesting.
Pavarotti?" And he's like, Ozzy will be that person. Bowie is that person. Kurt
Sometimes we don't know
Cobain
it.
is that
Yeah.
person.
Sometimes we don't know it when they're alive. There was a writer who wrote a book about this. Like in 50 years from now, who are going to be the artists that people, right now you would say it's going to be Taylor Swift and Harry Styles. We don't really know in 50 years who it's going to be. It feels like it's going to be those people. But, he was making this prediction that like in 50 years, Chuck Berry would be like more well known than Elvis. I mean, this is just his theory, but it's just interesting. For somebody like Ozzy, he just tapped into something. There was a lot of heavy metal artists at that time, but he has a special kind of something, like you said, that like
Like
really,
biting the head off a bat. But
yeah,
it's iconic. And I'm a vegan. Don't like that. But it's
no,
iconic. There's also this idea that he breaks away from that band. Yes, he's fired, but he breaks away and he makes it on his own. The Prince of Darkness, you
Yeah.
know, Mama, I'm coming home. Like he's not just I feel like Iron Man, Sharon. I gotta give where credit is due. There is no Ozzy without Sharon. Sharon is the one who, when Ozzy's kicked out of Sabbath by her father, the manager, she is a teenager. And yes, she's gaga for that man, but she picks him up and she puts him back out there and says, "You are Ozzy Osbourne. You don't need my dad. You don't need Sabbath." And then she's the one that starts Ozfest, you
Mm,
know? I
right.
don't know, but I'm assuming she's the one that gets them on MTV, which gives him, when you think about David Bowie, you think about different chapters. You think about Prince, you think about different chapters, the early Prince, the Purple Rain Prince, the Prince at the Super Bowl where the skies open up. So you have these different chapters which allow different generations to become aware of and fall in love with these characters. And
Yeah.
Ozzy, right?
Yeah, these
Like
chapters. By the
and
way,
also nicest man.
super nice, like personable and sweet. And it's like he's not a guy that's going to bite a. It was. I don't want to say it was an act because he was channeling something, maybe an id of his or something. But in person, he was just a lovely person. And I was always. I mean, I guess people saw this in the Osbournes, but when I went to his home, I was kind of surprised how sort of like well appointed it was, and like all these antique furniture. Now, it was probably a lot of Sharon's influence, but it was just very. It was like an old English home. It wasn't like where you'd think. Like I went to Marilyn Manson's home, not Marilyn Manson. I can't think of who it was, but another one of these hard rockers. And they had, I mean, it was like what you would imagine. He had all these wax figurines of like the creature from the Black Lagoon. And like, who was that artist who ended up making scary movies? He ended up directing scary movies. Can't think of his name right now. Anyway, that's
Oh,
too.
Danzig?
What's that?
Was it Danzig?
No. Anyway, well, if anybody who's joining,
I know. Shout it out
he
because I
made.
know who he's talking about.
I know. I can't figure out why I can't. He made the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yeah.
and yeah, I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, he was what you would imagine a heavy rock, like all these scary things.
Brian is
But
saying Rob Zombie.
Rob Zombie. Thank you,
Hi,
Brian.
Brian.
It was Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie's home was exactly what you think Rob Zombie's home would look like. Ozzy's looked like I was at King George's, summer retreat house in Worcestershire. Anyway, so
Where
that was
was
kind of
it? Were
interesting.
you in England?
No, I saw him in Beverly Hills. He had a place like above where all these celebrities lived in the same row. Like he was like right next to Paris Hilton. It was all these celebrities in this one street, like right above Sunset Boulevard. Um, all right, I want to move on. Ozzy's amazing.
Can
You
I
had
ask?
mentioned,
Can I add one more thing real quick?
please do.
I also think Ozzy had the luck that he did to die at the top of his game the way Bowie did. Bowie releases this record, on his birthday, a return record, a fucking amazing record, and then 2 days later, the way people talk about it is he poof
Yeah,
had a disappearing act, like he did it himself, right? We know that's not true. He wanted to live, all that.
yeah,
The
but it
fact that
fell. It's
Ozzy
mythology.
turned up at that Sabbath gig in
Mm,
Birmingham, that I think also just showed that he was Ozzy till the end. I mean, it was like with David Bowie, even like a week before he died, he went to his New York play that he was putting on um, in the city. That's the thing.
yeah,
I think
they're
like
like
there seems
mythology. Yeah, there's like a
mythology. Yes.
some of these people, they're just almost, I mean, they're humans, obviously, but they're just like almost like a different, like a step above. Like there's just something
Well,
magical
we
about them.
deify them.
Yeah, we do, but they deserve some of our deification. I mean, David Bowie, one of the things, your book, which is great. What is the name of your book again? I don't have it
Where
in
is it?
front
I
of
have it right here. Hold on.
me.
I refer to it. I
Yeah,
refer
Mad
to it.
World, of course, it's a perfect title. Mad World, one of the things you make a big point of is because it's oral histories. All these people you talk to, and you talk to all these people, like these new wave artists from the 80s, they all credit David Bowie. I didn't realize just how influential David Bowie was to the whole new wave moment. Like he's the original guy. Like he was the one that kind of set it all in motion. They were all inspired by him. Um, he's just like, without David Bowie, there wouldn't have been the 80s that I love so much. Like, didn't you get that impression? Like, he was the guy, like, they all grew up with.
Yes, there was that moment, I think it's 1972, when David Bowie goes on to TV, British Top of the Pops, dressed for the first time as Ziggy Stardust, and he breaks the fourth wall. Like, so he's singing, and then he goes, "I picked on you."
Yeah.
Right? He goes, "Picked on you, ooh, ooh." You could watch
Right.
it
To the
on.
audience.
And in breaking the fourth wall, there were so many artists who, in their formative years, 13-ish, are like me. Like, they, whether or not that was specific or it just grew into their brain, it became this iconic moment that so many artists from the 80s alternative era point to as the Big Bang. And
Yeah.
what is weird about that, right, is that this actually happened in black and white because
Mm.
most people, I don't even think there were color TVs yet,
Yeah, maybe not in 72.
but people remember it, like Marco Peroni from Adam and the Ants, Gary Kemp from Spandau Ballet. They will swear to God that it was in color, that they saw
Mm.
color.
Right.
Because it literally
Yeah.
colored their world. The next day, people who would have called people with men with makeup poofs, a bad word in England, are now coming with their nail polish to school. It changed the world overnight. And the difference between that world and this world is that it was so centralized. An
Yeah.
entire family watched Top of the Pops. So it changed the
Yeah.
world
I was thinking you
overnight.
couldn't really have that moment now because everybody gets their medias in so many different ways. So if I were to ask my kids, I'm wondering if we were to have this conversation in 40 years, would our kids be able to say, oh, yeah, there was that moment when I saw such and such
Yes, at the
artist? Yeah.
Coldplay
Collectively.
concert where that guy was
Oh,
cheating on his wife. That's like
that will
the
be something
most.
that, oh, that's like a moment. That's true. There are certain moments, unfortunately, for that guy, or maybe not, unfortunately, whatever. There are certain moments that everybody knows of. Yeah, they're memes. They'll talk about those memes forever and ever and ever.
But
That is
even
true.
memes you might not see at the same moment, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's interesting how, like, the Bowie moment was everyone in front of the TV at that exact time as
yeah.
it's
Like
happening.
the moon
Whereas, like,
landing or something.
now, me seeing the meme tomorrow might be different than you seeing the
Yeah.
memes next day.
For me, growing up, that moment was probably the Michael Jackson Motown 25, moonwalk thing. That was
So many
hugely
people say
influential
that.
for me because I was into breakdancing and I was like, that just blew my freaking mind. I had it, and thankfully I had the wherewithal to video record it. And so, like, back then you couldn't ever find those clips again, right? You didn't have YouTube. So I would like rewind it and watch it over and over and over again. And learn. I taught myself how to moonwalk, et cetera, et cetera. So he was a huge
Mine was
influence on me.
probably Live Aid.
Oh yeah, Live Aid was amazing. I
We'll
want
never forget.
I'm like looking at the clock because it's like I could talk to you for hours and I want to be respectful of your time. We
I
talked
almost
about
forget people are listening. Hi to everyone,
I
because
know, isn't it so
I
cool?
just blah blah because I go into this hole. I
You're the
love
best.
talking about this shit. Love it.
Well, I'm so excited that all these people are here. Hi Rick, hi Karen, hi Dawn. I even saw Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know if it's the Elizabeth Gilbert, but if I'm a huge fan if you're watching Elizabeth Gilbert. Dan Powell, thank you. Susan Schultz. Do you know her name?
Susan Schultz, yeah, she's a magazine editor
Yeah,
too.
exactly. She has been so wonderfully supportive of what I'm doing at Small Talk. So shout out to Susan. And she was so excited that you were coming on the show. Um, okay. One of the things I want to talk to you about is you're amazing in the way that you have, again, in a very Gen X way, kind of adapted and pivoted to your career and are able to make money and do what you love. And I really admire that. How did you parlay? Because you had this magazine background and you also had this strong, obviously, interest and association with 80s music, new wave music, and your affiliation with Duran Duran and all these other artists that you've interviewed. But how did you like turn this into what you're doing now at Sirius XM? If people don't, maybe tell people exactly what you're doing at Sirius XM if they're not familiar with it, but you've sort of become like the Tabitha Soren. I don't know. You're like the 80s. But like a lot of the talent that they have at Sirius XM are like old radio DJs or old MTV VJs. But you weren't part of that's not your background, but you still are just as much an expert in that way. So this is a very long preamble, but how did you change that? How did you how did you become
Survival.
but how did you even
See,
find that job?
the thing is, Jonathan, I wanted to be in magazines. Susan, were you at Cosmo Girl? I'm trying to remember. Susan Schultz at Cosmo Girl. Um,
Yeah, she's definitely an editor. She's there. She'll tell us. I
I
know.
I wanted to be in magazines. It was my dream. She says yes. It was I loved a magazine. NYM suit. That's right.
Right.
That's right. I I loved a magazine called Smash Hits, which was
Hmm.
British. And in America, we had Star Hits. And I loved it all. I loved the photos. I loved the headlines. I loved the columns. I I loved everything. And when I realized, like, okay, Duran Duran and uh magazines, put them together,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like what I want to be, right?
Right.
So when I was in magazines, it was what I wanted. And then magazines changed. They stopped giving us money for photo shoots. They wanted us to
Right.
pick up photos. And I mean, one of my favorite thing was being at a photo shoot, like seeing what the artist was going to wear, thinking of a
Hmm.
headline, doing the interview, pulling it all together. Like it was just a dream of mine. And so when I saw where this was headed, which was like Huffington Post era, I mean, I wrote for the internet, but like I, I didn't get to do photo shoots for that.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay. So I went and I did a couple of years of what is it called when you do like I'm forgetting not Sabbath
A
when you do
hiatus or
a hiatus, but when you help I volunteered for Do Something. It was my
is
it's
it?
like
Are you looking? I don't know.
not a
Help us. A sabbatical?
sabbatical.
No.
Sabbatical.
Yes.
Susan said.
Susan is the
So
best. Yes, Susan.
yeah, so I was like, you know what? I have to get my head around I have to do something different. So
Mm.
for it was over a year, but I basically helped start a thing with Do Something, which was Do Something is it's an organization that puts money directly into the hands of teenagers to change the world.
Mm.
So these teens, and it was inspired by my first cover of Teen People, Jennifer Love Hewitt,
Ooh.
when I asked her what does it mean to you to be on the very first cover of Teen People, which I was a formative editor of, like a founding editor of, she said, I don't have to wait until I grow up. I can change the world now. She was 16.
Mm.
And I thought, oh my God, yes, that's kind of in a nutshell what I love, like about being young. And I was only a few years older than her. I was like 23 or something, like writing this
Yeah.
article. So Do Something, that's what they did, is they helped empower financially people who wanted to make the world a better place.
Hmm.
And while I was there, we did the Do Something Awards with VH1. So I think Lady Gaga was on that,
Oh,
and
cool.
it was hosted by, oh my God, Jane. I forgot her name, the actress from Glee, and it went from me trying to convince celebrity publicists that you should have a cause the same way you have a hairstylist and a clothes
Hmm.
stylist, and you should have a cause because you should be doing something role modeling and being
Yeah.
and using that force for good. That's that
And not,
power.
yeah.
So that I was very proud of that, but I knew that it wasn't generating content, and that's what I love doing. And so I wrote my book, Mad World, and then that book led to me being booked as an expert, as you said, like a Tabitha Storin, which is the most flattering thing you could say. As
Somebody said you're a Tabitha Soren. Got that from the comments, so I'm gonna give whoever said that. It's
you
so
know
sweet.
what? Whoever says that, that's like extremely flattering. But
Love.
I became a voice because at that now everyone loves the 80s. At that time, which was like 2012, 2013, the 80s were still a punchline.
Yeah.
And
The
I
big
was
'80s,
standing
big
up
hair.
saying, no, this is the era of quality. And at the end, I was on the CNN 80s music episode. And at the very end, Questlove says, this is the best decade in music because it was all different things and it can never happen again. And
Mhm.
I was like, that's exactly it, you know?
Yeah.
They booked me for the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And then I was a guest on Sirius XM, and then I got a call asking me to audition, which was again super flattering. And I said to my husband, I was in Alaska when I got the call. I go, I know I'll never get this, but of course I'm going to go up for it. And I got it on the first audition, which was bananas. And I think the reason I got it, first of all, SiriusXM hires experts, not necessarily just people who have radio names. I would,
Mhm.
like, but they have people like Larry the Duck, Richard Blade, my
Yeah.
co-host Nick Carter. That's not his real name. He hates that I say that
Right.
sometimes, but I was like, I'm Lori Majewski. Like I've been married before. I never took
Yep.
my
Right.
ex-husband's name. I don't have my current husband's name. I'm just
Those
me.
guys are former DJs, right? Those guys are like like I said, a lot of those people are like former DJs that grew up like a K Rock and stuff like that. You're like, yeah, you are more
I'm
you.
the
You're not, you
fan.
weren't like a,
I'm the fan.
yeah, you're the fan. That's a
So
good thing.
not having a fake
Right.
name is indicative of the lack of artifice. Jane Lynch, Damon, you were right. Um, the actress in Glee. That I think that's what I represent. And I didn't know it at the time, but I've been told it enough by listeners that you are me. You are me with a mic. You are me on the radio. So like when I'm on Sirius XM, the channel 33 is First Wave, which is the classic alternative era from the 70s and 80s and some 90s.
I'm
I'm
constantly
also,
on first wave.
yes, it's the
I'm
best.
on first wave is like, and when it goes dark wave, then I get really happy. I
So,
love
but
dark
I
wave.
am the one that's saying, okay, today's the anniversary of Live Aid. I was there. I'm the one saying, I
Yeah.
remember when Mark Goodman said this. I remember being at this Duran Duran show here. And even now, I broke my wrist.
Yep.
I broke my
Oh no.
wrist.
And you
And
hurt your teeth. You had things going on. Like every time I call you, there'd be like some other like ailment going on. I'm like, Lori, what's going on? You okay? I'm just glad you're okay now.
I
You're
broke
you're
my wrist. And I
you were
broke
like
my
when I wrote
knee.
you, you're like, I'm dictating this on a phone because I can't type. I was
It's
like, oh no.
horrible. But
I know.
I I broke my wrist and I've been in a very dark place all summer. And my husband said to me, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And I haven't been on a trip without my child in at least a year and a half. So I said, I want to go to Paris. Well,
Hmm.
don't you fucking know it, Jonathan, that it turns out that Duran Duran is playing Paris right
Amazing. You were like, John, I'm gonna be in Paris. That's
now.
awesome.
I'm
Amazing.
nuts. Like, how did what?
Must have been so
So
fun.
I don't even know what the fuck. So there's the authenticity. So I just blah
Well,
blah.
but I think there's a lesson for all of us in that. It's kind of like, you know, do what feels the most true to you, and you have done that in your life, and I think that's been very much a great example. Like you look, a lot of us have had to work for magazines that we probably didn't really identify that much with, or at least I have. Like I worked for Glamour. Like I will admit that I am not the Glamour reader. Like I was kind of the token
But
dude
you
at Glamour.
carved a niche out of being the
I did.
guy.
I figured it out. But I've definitely worked for places where like it was just complimenting who you were anyway, so it felt very natural, and I think that's great. And I think you know, again, you could start a Substack and like what I'm doing now, and just doing and writing about stuff that I'm just interested in, and talking to people that I think that I'm interested in, and share the same interest. And I don't know where this is going to lead, but I'm just excited to be able to do this. And I think a lot of us should sort of think about life that way now, especially at the time that a lot of us find ourselves in our life. Not, and again, this doesn't have to be like my full-time hustle, but it's just something I'm doing. It's fun. And I'm selling merch. My Gen X Files hat. My
I love that.
Mr. Cacciatore's down on Sullivan Street Billy Joel t-shirt. Anyway,
And I
I'm
may
just
be alternative, but I have to tell you, I love that Billy Joel documentary.
Isn't it incredible?
It was
We talked about it
so
with
good.
Sam Hollander. I talked about that last week with Sam. I love that. And while we're talking about documentaries and we were talking about George Michael, that Wham documentary is incredible. That made me appreciate George Michael so much more. I mean, it just made me learn more about George Michael. So I recommend if you haven't watched anything tonight, the Billy Joel doc is a must watch. The
So good.
Wham, and also can we just put a shout out to, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because we talked about this last week, The Greatest Night of Pop, the We Are the World documentary. Did you watch that one?
I did, and I have to tell you,
Oh,
as
interesting.
an Anglophile and Band-Aid fan, I always
Oh,
felt that America was a copycat, and they were.
hmm,
In my Mad World book,
yeah,
Nick Rhodes has a quote, Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, where he talks about it, and he goes, "Well, of course, USA for Africa has to
right.
call the song 'We Are the World' because
Yeah,
America-centric, right?" But
interesting.
that doc changed my point of view. I'm
It,
glad that I watched it. It made me feel proud. It made me
hmm,
feel proud to be an American. It made me feel that, oh my God, the talent that we had, that talent in that room.
crazy.
Do you
That
know,
period of time.
I'm a massive Steve Perry fan.
Mm,
And I just still think that Steve Perry and Freddie Mercury and George Michael are like the holy trinity of vocal. Like, I
yeah.
just think they're incredible. And in that room, I mean, every single voice, Kenny Loggins, you used to
Huey
kind of
Lewis.
laugh. What?
Huey Lewis just all
Huey.
of a sudden out of nowhere. Yeah.
And Huey Lewis, that was supposed to be Prince's line.
Right.
And
That's he
right?
stepped in.
And he got it, right?
Yeah.
Because
Like
they
on his
only had
first take, and he was
Sheila
so
E. to
nervous.
come.
And they kept showing his face, and he was a wreck because he wasn't really like as big a deal as the people in that circle were. Um,
And the fact that they addressed what I've always been pissed about was that Madonna wasn't there. And they were
mm,
like, well, we have Cyndi Lauper. We can't have Cyndi and
no, that was
Madonna.
bullshit. They
Hi, you
couldn't
had
get.
Michael, you had, Steve Perry and Kenny Loggins. No one said anything. It's so sexist. And the thing is, I've
But is
talked
that
to
true? I feel like isn't Madonna just didn't do it. I think she was the biggest
No.
artist.
Uh,
Oh, really?
Listen to this. I talked
Okay.
to Nile Rodgers about this. Nile said that he and Quincy Jones and Madonna were out to dinner and that Quincy said it's time. They were the whole time they talked about going afterwards to USA for Africa recording. And then they did. And Madonna sat there the whole fucking time, like, you're fucking not going to ask me. And she almost didn't do Live Aid because of it. She was so
Wow.
pissed. And
That
it's
is
true. Why couldn't you? Madonna and Cyndi Lauper have nothing in common but a vagina.
nothing. Yeah, nothing in common. Well, let's talk about Cyndi Lauper for 1 minute because you mentioned that you've been working or talking to Cyndi Lauper a lot lately. I'm about to go see her in concert. She's coming to the Hollywood Bowl at the end of the month. I'm really
Uh,
excited about that show.
So
And
she was on my Fierce Women in Music show. I have a show on Sirius XM called Fierce Women in Music, about 100 episodes now, maybe more, of me talking one-on-one with women. And Jonathan, you wouldn't know it, but like so few women artists get interviewed by women journalists that
oh, okay.
just
So I was going to
just
say, please come on my show, but maybe you can interview them on my show.
well,
Well, you
no,
have
but
your
it's
own show.
called Fierce Women. You can
I
have
know.
them here, but it's a different
I get
conversation.
it. I get it. Of course it is. Yeah. So tell me about what you've learned about Cindy.
Well, first of all, the first I get on, the Zoom and it has our names, right? And hers says Cynthia Lauper. And I'm like, Cynthia?
Cynthia. That's funny.
Cynthia? And I was like, is this like Debbie Gibson when she became a Deborah? Like,
Yeah.
what is this? And she said that in her life, like people still call her Cynthia. Like her mother called her Cynthia. And she always was pissed at her mom because she spelled her name CY. And she said that at school, people were like, what do you think? You're so special because you're
Right.
CYNDI rather than CINDY. See,
Oh,
what I love about doing these interviews is the details.
right.
Because to me, I then said to her, do you feel like your mom naming you and spelling it that way and people getting on you about it made you feel different? And that
Hmm.
being ostracized made you, she's so unusual.
Yeah.
And it's true. It
Yeah.
informed who she would become. And I feel like, if anything, she's a bit underrated because we just think of
Totally.
her as the cartoon of, you know, girls just want to have fun, the cartoon image of her hair. And like, I'm a
Yeah.
host on the 80s cruise, and like most people dress like Cindy any day of the week. But she's so much more than that. And I really think she's so talented, and she in her own way, we don't play Cyndi Lauper on First Wave, but she in her own way is alternative.
You don't play Cyndi Lauper on First Wave? Like her music? That's true. I've never heard Girls
She's
Want to Have Fun.
80s on 8.
Oh, so she's not really considered new wave. She's like pop or whatever. That's so interesting. I never
And
would
it's
think about
the
that. To
line
me,
is so
she's,
blurry.
yeah, how do you even
If
make
she
that
were
distinction?
British, I bet she'd be on the channel.
Yeah, it's true. Time After Time to me is a completely a new wave song. I don't even, yeah.
Yes. And
Um,
perfect. What a song.
it's an incredible song. I can't even, it makes me always sad because, and Marco, you'll relate to this, is when I broke up with my girlfriend in high school, and every song, every time I hear that song, I start crying because it's like when I broke up, and it's like, but what a beautiful song. So she's amazing. And now we know that she's Cynthia. That's why she's Cindy, because it's Cynthia, which is spelled C-Y-N. Okay. So now she's, and by the way, in that documentary, that was interesting. She almost didn't do We Are the World because her boyfriend told her, "Oh, this is like corny or whatever. Don't do this." And she almost didn't show up. Can you imagine if she had not shown up? We wouldn't get that. Well, it's true.
And see, that's when I talk about talent, she had the balls
I,
in that room of literal balls
yeah,
to riff, to
yeah,
give it her own spin. I
uh,
just, I think about it sometimes and I'm like, she, I do believe that this documentary is part of a comeback of sorts for Cindy. And it's partially why she has been playing, she's going to play the Hollywood Bowl
yeah.
rather than just like a smaller venue. I feel like that documentary helped to reframe the Cyndi Lauper story.
Okay. I think there needs to, I thought you were talking about there was going to be a Cyndi Lauper documentary because I think there
There
should be.
was a
Was
couple of
there?
years ago. And usually that's the red carpet that gets rolled out for someone's entree into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
But it didn't help her cause. She didn't get in that year. And it
Well,
honestly, I don't think it was as compelling a doc as it could have been.
hmm, interesting. Well, all right. Well, this has been amazing. Let me open it up. I don't know if anybody from the chat has any questions for Lori. I literally want to bring Lori on every episode, but I know I can't. But you were just like such a wealth of information, and I just admire what you've done in your career so much. And just staying true to what you love and making a go at it, right? Just being able to
Well, right back at you,
monetize
Jonathan.
monetize it. Well, we're pivoters, and I appreciate that. But yeah, and what is your take? What is your advice to, I'm sure you talk to a lot of people in our generation who are kind of like at a loss right now. Like there was that New York Times article, I don't know if you read it, that came out a few months ago that was said basically like Gen X is like, they said we're candlestick makers in the age of electricity, and that we're basically like all the people that grew up in magazines and grew up, doing media, traditional media, are now like having trouble finding work. And, we didn't really have our 401ks didn't really pan out. Basically, it's like all doom and gloom for people in their 50s. Right. And while there's some truth like that, we're, definitely stressed out like any generation. I also am not so worried about us because I feel like we are incredibly adaptable as a generation, as a group of people. And again, I'm not generational. I don't like to paint it all as one monolith. There's different types of people, but we generally have a lot of similar DNA. And part of it is that we are adaptable. We're able to pivot a lot. You are certainly an example of that. And what advice do you give? Like if somebody is like, like I can't find a freaking job, like nobody will freaking hire me, a 50-year-old person anymore. Like what do you say to that person? Like I can tell you what I say, but I'm curious what you say.
Well, do you want to go first?
No, I'm not. I've already given my spiel on this. I love, you're probably much
Well,
better at
I
this.
want to address this in two quick parts. First, you mentioned that we're the candlestick makers
Oh, I don't believe that. But that's
in
what that guy
electricity
said.
world. I'd rather fucking make the candlesticks.
Okay.
It's tangible. Everyone was so into, for all this digital world, we've gone back to
Right.
having a turntable. We've
Right.
gone back. Kids today are buying fucking
Right.
albums.
The
And you know
IRL
what?
in real life. IRL.
The,
That's what
the
they call it.
live concert industry is bigger than it's ever been in the history of music. I'm going to see fucking Oasis at
Ah,
the stadium next
where?
weekend. MetLife
Oh,
in New
nice.
Jersey.
Okay. Okay.
I saw them for the first time at Maxwell's in New Jersey, which was like, it was
Oh,
like
amazing.
60 people. Okay. But
Yeah.
my point is that there is a place for authenticity and tangible reality, actual fucking physical books,
Yep.
actual like there's something to be said. I love technology. Me and you are using it right now. Okay.
Yeah.
But I just had lunch with a girlfriend of mine who is maybe a few years younger than me, but still Gen X. She is dreaming of she's going to go and get her reflexology degree because she wants
Hmm.
to do reflexology. I'm
Right.
like, fucking do it. I
Yeah.
feel the problem is the people, and I don't, the person that wrote that article, I'd like to know the age of that person.
Well, I looked it up. They are a Gen Xer, which surprised me. Just like Elizabeth Spears, who's a Gen Xer, just wrote a really nasty article in the New York Times about us as well. And I don't know why we feed on our own, but we seem to do that. Some
So
of
do
us do.
Democrats.
Yeah.
I think the thing here is that we want passion. We want to do things that matter to us. And I think that the subsequent generations put a premium on money. They put a premium on what can be done to make more money and then to have like I see all these like memes about I own 5 Airbnbs and I have all this passive income and I'm like, "Oh, that's fucking smart. I wish I had that too." But no, because it's not my passion. I don't
Yeah.
want to be dealing with fucking people who are fucking up my house. I don't want all that. I just want to write and I
Mm,
just want to communicate and I just want to listen to music. I don't need to be a billionaire. You know what I mean? Like I
right.
that's the thing, and I think there's a subtle jealousy or not so subtle. Why do you think Friends is the number one show, for Gen Zers? Because they wish they had a life before phones, and they wish they had a life that was tangible, and they could like go. You think you can go meet like Taylor Swift outside a hotel right now? Like,
Right.
I got to know my heroes because we lived in a smaller world in a lot of ways. And so I'm not as rich because of it. I'm
Yeah.
rich in other ways.
I
So
know.
that's the first part of the question.
I love that.
Does that pay the bills though? Not necessarily. Um, I have to take what I'm good at and divide it into many different things. So
Different
yes,
streams, right?
I
Different
wrote a
streams.
book. I'm on Sirius XM. I write articles, I still write, I did a cover story on Casey Musgraves for The Hollywood
Oh,
Reporter not
oh, I
that long.
love Casey Mace. That's great. Okay, that's
I
great.
love her.
Yeah.
I am a host on the 80s cruise every year. Like, so it's
That's a whole other episode. I want to know what the hell that means. But anyway, go on.
best thing ever. Best
Really?
thing.
Okay.
So it's diversification, but staying true to who I am.
Yep.
I sometimes see these things on Instagram, how to make better videos, and I'm like, oh, I should do that. I should do that. That's the only time I feel really old is like, God, I only use Chat GBT and I walk around my garden. Like, should I put the tomatoes next to the, like I could do
Yeah.
better. I know I could do better, but
But if it's not natural, again, it's hard. You have to sort of be a consumer of those things to really want to. So if you were on Instagram all the time and and you were really using it, then maybe it would be. But if you're just like, I'm going to be an Instagrammer and didn't really have any experience, I just talked to somebody on my podcast, Kyla Yu, who's our age, who is like a big TikToker. She's got 500,000 fans, but she is on TikTok all day long. That's like her life. And so she knows TikTok. She likes TikTok. It's natural to her. It's not going to feel forced. So I don't know. I just think it's like gravitate to where you can sort of experiment with things, but gravitate to where you're comfortable, the place you want to be. That's why I like Substack, because I feel very comfortable. I like the people on Substack. I feel like seems like a certain age range of people that are closer to my age, unlike TikTok where I feel like everybody is my kid's age, which is
I
probably
wonder
not
if
true.
most of the people listening are Gen X. If you're
I mean,
not Gen X, maybe write us a message
write a
because
message.
it's interesting. I think I'm really influenced by you, Jonathan, because I've been thinking a lot more about Substack. I wrote one piece when Clem Burke of Blondie died, and it wasn't necessarily about Blondie or Clem Burke. It was about my friend who loves Blondie as I do, Duran Duran.
Mm,
He's a super fan, and how when I heard the news, it devastated me
mm,
for him. And I've been thinking every day I wake up with something I want to talk about that's Gen X
You
related.
should do it.
And I
Go
think
for it.
I think
Yeah,
I
it's
wanna
fun.
do
You
that. So
certainly have
anyone
a built-in audience.
listening wanna follow me? 'Cause, like, I
Yeah,
wanna figure this
you
out.
have. Yes, you have. And we should put in our little plugs here. Please follow if you're not already. Follow Small Talk and follow Lori Majewski. What are you? Your handle is like Lori. What is it again? It's like
I'm
Lori.
at Lori Majewski on most things.
Yeah, so you're at Lori Majewski. I found you fairly easily, but you haven't done a lot on Substack. That's fine. You're busy, and again, it's like it has to be a little bit of a labor of love because we are used to getting paid for our writing. I will admit that. And so it's a little hard sometimes to write for free. But because I'm writing for, and I'm not necessarily writing for free, we have subscribers, and it would be nice if people would subscribe. It's always be a paid subscriber. I appreciate that so much. But again, it's just one source of income. I think the message I give to people is don't be so opposed to being a multi hyphenate. We kind of grew up with a model of like, I'm going to be this one thing my whole life. Like I thought I was going to be a magazine editor my whole life and that I would probably maybe hopefully in a great world rise to be editor in chief and then maybe rise to be an editorial director. I don't know what it was, but that was sort of the path that I was on. Then my entire industry disappeared. And I had to
Not
do
our
other things.
fault.
It's
It was
not
the
our fault.
boomers who refused to pivot. I know I
Yeah.
saw one boomer in here. Sorry about that, but it
We
really
like some
was.
boomers, yes. And so being a multi hyphenate, I mean, as I wrote, it's like when people now ask me what I do for a living, it used to be such an easy answer. Oh, I'm an editor at Glamour or whatever. Now it's like, oh, do you have 25 minutes? I'm whatever. I've got a Substack. I got a podcast company. I do.
We're a
I
communicator, Jonathan.
yeah,
That's what I tell people.
a
I'm a
communicator.
communicator.
Okay. Well, that's a great line. I got to start using that because people in airplanes, I could see their eyes just glaze over when I'm explaining. 25 minutes later, I'm like, and then I also did, and they're just like, why did I even ask this guy this question? All
But
right. This
the
has
more
been,
things you do, the more interesting a person you are.
it is true.
Life
It's
is
just
long.
exhausting. It just can be a little bit exhausting to do. I get it. Like we're like getting a little older and it's like tiring to do a lot of different things, but it does make you more interesting. It certainly gives me a lot to think about all day. This is just one thing I'm doing today, and then I got to do another job right as soon as I got off the phone with you. And so, but I don't
Me
know. I
too.
don't mind it.
I have to be
I
on
am.
Sirius XM when I get off the
Are you
phone with you.
serious? Do you do it
I'm
from your home?
serious.
Do you do it from
Yes,
your home?
I do my job, 90% of it is from home now.
Okay.
But I just wanna say before I let you go, you mentioned the Sam Hollander episode. Um, can I hear episodes of Small Talk,
Yes,
or
they are
are
all
they only
there. Yep.
live?
No, they're not, and you're going to be able to hear people who miss this are all going to be able to hear this because as soon as we get off,
I can share
I
it
will.
with peeps?
You can share it with peeps. It'll give you the option to share it. So this is not a one time, which is really nice. This is sort of like a live podcast that you can recirculate, which is I love that Substack does offer this. I don't totally understand why it's only on the phone. I've got all this fancy equipment and I got to use a freaking phone to do it. But it is what it is. And it's really fun to do these live because I've done podcasts for years and you're just doing it, with you and the guest this is so wonderful to have a little audience here of 60 people. So I love that. And so, yes, you can do these live. I hope if you start doing Substack, you'll have me on your show. It is, people will know that I've been DJ Kid Finesse since 8th grade. So that's my little passion of I always wanted to be a DJ. Somehow that was a road not taken for me. Yeah,
Yes.
yet maybe Sirius
You'll
XM.
do
If
it.
anybody's, I mean, the Sirius XM office in LA is like a walking distance from me. So I will drive by and I'm like, oh my God.
Really? I'm gonna come see you
Really?
IRL.
Please. Yes. IRL, please do because it's right there in Hollywood, right next to me. All right. Well, Lori, this has been a pleasure. It's even been better than I imagined.
I'm
Please
just
subscribe.
happy people showed up.
Me too. People show up and more people show up every time. So I feel like if I just keep going, next week we've got another great guest. We'll bring Lori back again. And yeah, next week we have Elaine Lowe from The Ankler, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with The Ankler. Do you know The Ankler?
Yes, my old
Alice?
boss from Us Weekly, Janet Min, I think is
I
in
think she
charge of
started
the
it.
Ankler.
Right. And
Yeah,
then
or
she
she
hired
bought it or
Allison.
something.
She hired Allison Brower. I don't know if you know Allison, who is a former colleague um, from Glamour. Anyway, Janice not Janice. Elaine is younger than we are, but she wrote a really interesting article about Gen X in Hollywood that is half positive, half not, but just sort of what they're going through. Because she did a huge research thing where she talked to like all these Gen Xers in Hollywood about like where they are in their career right now. So I thought that would be really interesting to have her on. So that's what we're talking about next week.
Yeah.
We talked about music this week. We're going to talk about Hollywood next week. And yeah, we'll keep doing this thing. So peace out, everybody. It's been a really pleasure, Lori. So great always connecting with you. Please
And
call me when you're
Susan
in LA.
Schultz.
Susan Schultz, you are the best.
Good for
We
you.
love you.
So many
Yeah.
good people.
Mark
Jonathan,
Ranieri,
good
what's
luck
up?
with this
Mark
experiment.
Ranieri, shout out to Kim Carnes. I wish Kim Carnes joined. Is Kim Carnes still with us? And Elizabeth Gilbert, great writer. All right. So peace, everybody. Bye.